Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You're here with Thomas Stokell and Kit Miller. Kit, can you hear me?
Sure can.
How are you doing today, Kit?
I'm well. I'm well. I'm just doing a couple emails while I was hanging out waiting for you to get started. So as usual, I'm multitasking.
Good, good. Well, as usual, we'll start off with some gratitude. Whilst Kit and I think of something to share with you all, you can also think of something you might like to share with us. You can type your things you're grateful for and on the questions panel, and we can read some of those out. Kit, is there something that you're particularly grateful for recently?
Well, I'm going to celebrate your birthday,
Hmm.
which was yesterday, and so I'm grateful for you and our friendship, and that we know each other. And then my gratitude kind of broadens out even to just how many amazing, extraordinary humans I have in my life, and then it goes out further to our species, which sometimes I'm so grumpy with our species. Um, I don't like a lot of what we do, and at the same time, we are and do extraordinary things. Um, so and then I bring it back to you as an example of that today, and you were volunteering here yesterday on your birthday. Um, you're volunteering from your place in Atlanta, and I'm hundreds of miles away. But so I'm grateful for our species. I'm grateful for the people I know, and I'm grateful for you.
Well, you probably can't see it, but you might be able to hear my smile, Kit. It's really big. Can you hear it?
Yep.
Good. Yeah, and actually, one of my presents I gave myself yesterday was volunteering with the Ghanaian Institute yesterday. I actually edited down one of the sessions from last week to a 10-minute clip, so um, some of you might have heard that already, but if you haven't, it's worth a listen to, and of course, it's nice and shareable. 10 minutes Kit talking about the things that we talk about in these conversations. I'm grateful for being outside earlier today. It's freezing, literally freezing cold here in Atlanta, but it's sunny. And I was up on the our our deck, our terrace, and there's a little corner with a chair, and I sat in this chair in the sun, and it was a little sun trap. And I'm from New Zealand, so I wear shorts and a t-shirt as much as I can throughout the year, and bare feet. So I'm out there in the freezing, but I found warmth, a really nice pocket of warmth, even on a cold day. And I think obviously that's nice to think about, finding warmth in the world even when it seems quite cold. So I'm grateful for that today.
Hmm.
Um,
What are
we've
some
got
other things we're hearing from people?
Yeah, grateful to be able to connect with you and be supported and inspired. That's a nice comment there. One other thing that we're doing today is if you'd like to ask any questions, we can unmute the mic. You can ask a question. There's actually a putting up your hand function on this GoToWebinar piece of software. And of course, you can type in, as Judy just did, anything that you're particularly grateful for or um, feeling inspired about today. So, Kit, what would you like to share with us today?
I'm interested in sharing today some ideas that I kick around the issue of complexity and how it relates to change. Uh, so I'd like to speak a little bit about both of those things, if I might. I'm usually at work on some personal change project, and one is actually noticing and changing my relationship to complexity, because what I noticed is that I still struggle. So I'm not. This is not a done deal. I noticed that I subtly use force or other means sometimes to simplify situations that deserve to not be simplified, or they're just not simple. And so I want to be able to be someone who can hang in with complexity and enjoy it. I was especially inspired hearing Victor Lewis, who hails from the Bay Area, who's a remarkable teacher and leader out there. And Victor says that I heard him say that simple answers to complex problems tend to make problems worse. And that really made sense to me when I heard it. What do you think? Simple answers to complex problems tend to make problems worse.
Yeah, I can see that, the possibility of that. I mean, I think we're all looking for a simple answer. I think
Yep.
when we've got a complex thing, we can't necessarily deal with the complexity of understanding the problem. But if someone proposes a simple answer, oh, well, thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
That must be it. It's simple. I understand that. I might not understand the problem, but I understand that. And as Einstein said, if he had to, I think he said if he had to save the world in an hour, he'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem. What is the problem? And then only 5 minutes coming up with the solution. Um, as I think the problems that we are facing in the world tend to be rather complex, and therefore are likely to need a equally, not equally complex, but a simple answer might not suffice to solve this complex issue.
Mm-hmm. So that line made so much sense to me when I heard it. It kind of stopped me in my tracks. And then I've had the good fortune of hanging out with my friend Dominic Barter for some years, doing retreats together. And one of the things I treasure about that human being is the modeling that he offers to me in this realm. His willingness to not just relax with the complexity, but actually to cultivate it in situations is deeply inspiring to me. So I realized that I had this habitual relation to complexity in a way that said my subtle habit was I wanted to simplify things so I could feel effective in knowing how to relate to them. And so it's been fascinating for me to actually start to grapple with that in a different way. And it's also become part of my fascination with jazz, because jazz plays with complexity. So I don't know if there's any jazz fans on the call, but jazz helps me to also increase my fascination with complexity. I'd ask people on the call to think for a minute about the groups that you operate within and ask you, what have you seen that actually helps people relax with complexity? For me, there's hands down the best strategy is to slow things down, to reduce overwhelm or the anxiety that rises in people about wanting to come up with a solution to an issue so that they can feel good about themselves, so that they can feel good about their contribution. I think slowing down and naming the issues or factors in the situation is a very, very helpful move. And for me, whether I'm leading or coaching or facilitating, modeling is the most effective teaching that I know. So and sharing with what's authentic. Maybe my disappointment or my sadness or curiosity, whatever slows things down enough to let the complexity unfold. Last night I spent 2 hours with a student government, about 35 students in one of the local universities here, and they had called together students to try to talk about how can we create a campus that works in the best possible way in terms of safety and inclusivity and really nourishing intellectual curiosity. And we spent quite a bit of time talking about that, how quickly we want to make people and make situations simple, and how that actually ends up undermining so many things, our humanity, our ability to engage our moral creativity and moral imagination. So so thinking about the relation to complexity has been a really rich inquiry, and I feel thoughtful about it in relation, of course, to politics and even media and how information is chopped up for us now into these little bites that often try to have a specific beginning point and an end point, say, to a story. And life is so much more complex than that. So I want to pay attention to my emotional state when my mind is grappling with complexity, because my emotions drive a lot of that. So when I'm noticing myself feeling overwhelmed or frustrated or anxious in relation to complexity, I want to use the tools that I have to pay attention to that, name my experience that I'm having, and then come back to being willing to do sometimes this hard thing of not knowing what to do, but being willing to stay with it. A permaculture principle, and I'm a big fan of permaculture. I spent a summer some years ago reading or getting sort of certified in it with a local person here. I love permaculture I think of it as a nonviolent design system. It was developed by these two Australian, I think they were biologists, one of them who recently passed away, Bill Mollison. And permaculture seeks to identify the principles that natural systems utilize in order to create sustainable, healthy systems. So permaculture is just, for me, for many people, they mainly think about it as sort of as a tool to designing a garden or perhaps a farm. But I actually think about it a lot in terms of relating to myself as a system and relating to my time as a resource. And so one of the principles that helps me to reframe complexity as natural and desirable is called stacking function. Stacking function in a permaculture plan is placing an element or creating a plan or project that can do many things at once. Like, for instance, a tree in a permaculture design would provide food, shade, building material, firewood, oxygen, animal habitat, and could help prevent erosion. That's what one tree can do. So similarly, like a project that I'm trying to work on, maybe here at the Godding Institute, like offering a webinar such as this one, could educate people outside our geographic area, would help me and our staff to reflect on their work, our work and practice, could theoretically generate income and convey an educational experience to other people. So I'm always looking for, when I'm making a choice about something, what's the stacking function for it? And looking for stacking function is helping me to really get excited about complexity rather than having it be something I dread or minimize. So that's a little bit, and I'm hoping this isn't too heady for people, but helps to provide some, I don't know, some context. Sorry, my phone's going off over here. Curious to hear any thoughts or feedback about it.
Yeah, sure. So just a reminder to everyone, you can type in questions if you have any questions for Kit on any of the things that we talk about today. It is interesting, Kit, because obviously the natural world, gardening is a fairly complex system, from the bacteria in the soil to the plants, and obviously we try and simplify it down to an extent. So we might learn about sunlight and water and soil and seeds, and the combination of those things. And then, of course, we get into, if you want to do something well, provide a solution, as we've been talking about today. You really have to go a step deeper and understand that the bacteria in the soil makes a difference. And, if you plant certain plants, they'll fix nitrogen from the air, from the atmosphere. And then, companion planting and stacking and all these things come into it. So it's pretty interesting. It's a really nice analogy, actually, talking about permaculture and gardening when we look at, some of the complex systems that might exist in our society, in other parts of the natural world, in politics, etc.
I confess there's complexity happening in this moment. There's two people yelling at each other on the street right in front of me right now. So, but it looks like they're just going to yell at each other and not do anything else. So I feel happy. I'm less worried. Nope. Now they're pulling over, and now they are filming each other. No, one of them is filming. So this is the kind of situation where I would normally go down right now and intervene. And so I'm feeling torn because I don't like to just be an observer to people's conflicts. I like to go and help them.
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
being super transparent right now.
Do you want to go down and do that, Kit? I think
Uh,
it'd be
I
understandable if you did. It'll be interesting to hear about it when you come back.
yeah.
You
It
gonna
looks
make
like
a cup of tea?
yeah, yeah. It looks like they're working it out. Great. All right. All right. Sorry, just being real here. What's going on? What's going on in the neighborhood? Yes, it's complexity.
Mm.
And actually, complexity for me also, if I can just say another word about it, but I really would love to hear from somebody else on the call if they're willing to offer any feedback or thoughts, including this is boring, talk about something else. I mean, complexity is something that I think class privilege plays into. Having money to solve problems is something that we can often think we don't have to, we don't have to deal with this. We'll just pay for it and make it go away. If you don't have the resources to solve problems with money, then you often have to do other things. You have to do other things. So, so that I'm interested in also just there's different spaces where complexity is a given, and there's others where no, we can just solve it, we can fix it, we'll pay for this or we'll do that. But if you don't have access to this wonderful thing called currency, sometimes you've got other ways you've got to think about. And my apologies, I'm back to feeling distracted because these guys look like they're going to fight again. Okay, nope. Yes, no, they really are driving away. So I'm sorry, everybody. So I'm still curious to hear any people's thoughts or feedback on complexity or whatever else you would like to share right now.
Sure, I've just hopefully written a note to everyone, let them know where they can type that in. I'm quite curious, Kit, about what would you have done if you'd gone down to those two cars.
Oh, what I've done in quite a few situations that I just run down and I ask everybody if they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
I say, it looks like you guys are having a problem. Can I be of help?
Mm-hmm.
And I get close so that they see I'm not holding back out of fear, but that I'm genuinely trying to be with. And usually my experience is that when two people are sort of locked in a dynamic between them, a third person who comes in and is genuinely says, "What can I do to help?" actually breaks the stalemate. So that would have been my move if I hadn't been on the webinar. But they've left, so I'm hoping all is good.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, and then from there it's just listening to people and demonstrating care for all parties in the situation, which a recent situation, or I guess it was a while ago now, a police officer tackled a kid right in front of the house here in a way that looked really, really physically hard on the child, and who was 12 or 13. So I don't know if you call a 12 or 13-year-old a child. I do. And yeah, so I ran down and sort of said. By the time I actually got down to the street, his partner had showed up in a car, and because the police officer had been chasing him on foot, and so his partner had come in a car, and they had actually put this guy, and I was watching. They sort of stuffed him, sort of roughly, this young kid, in the back of the car. So I ran out the door, and the back seat is open, and they're both standing there. And I turned to the officer who'd done the tackling, who's the one that I would most likely have my enemy image of, to be totally honest with you. And I turned to him and I said, "Are you okay?" And so he was surprised by that, because he imagined that I was probably going to run out and yell. But so he was. I put him. It took him back, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm good." And I said, "Good." And then I pointed to the child and I said, "Do you think he's okay?" because by now you can hear the child saying, "I can't breathe." And of course, I'm remembering what happened with Eric Garner down in Staten Island. This man who, while being arrested, actually died because of that. And I said, I'm listening to this child say he can't breathe, and I'm worried. I'm worried about this situation. This is just the kind of situation that can end up making you, your department, and your career rough. So is there something we could do right now to make sure that this child is okay? And then I turned to his partner and I said, what do you think? And they called an ambulance. So, just showing up, demonstrating care, and being willing to get close to a situation. And this isn't everybody's MO, so please don't listen to me and think I wouldn't do this or that wasn't safe. Or so that, I completely respect everyone has their different boundaries and strategies. So I'm just telling you what I do right here.
I think that's, we talked last week about walking towards conflict, and
Right.
I think a lot of people, wouldn't feel they have the skills or capability to come in there, or they might have some hesitancy, they might do it, wrong, or
Yeah.
might have a different reaction, or they really want to help, but they just feel something's holding them back from doing that. So here, to go in there with care, to listen, and to express how you're feeling and what you want out of the situation.
Well, the fact that people don't feel ready is a great argument for the stuff I talked about last week, because I wasn't really ready to do something like that myself 10 or 20 years ago by any means. And I'm not really honestly ready to do it now, but I do it anyways because I have enough trust in myself. And I'm willing to take responsibility for things sometimes, even when I don't know what to do. And when it comes to the well-being of a younger person, then that's where I go. So I'm willing to take responsibility, and even if I don't know, I'm going to go down there and show up. But I completely can understand people would think I wouldn't know how to interact in a situation like that. Great, we'll keep practicing some of the ideas that we're talking about, and one of these days you will. And one of these days could be tomorrow, by the way. I mean, you never know what life's going to hand you.
Well, we had a comment come through saying this topic of complexity is fascinating and it's got me thinking. So obviously having some good feedback.
Good. If it hasn't got you thinking, you're like well, actually, I don't have anything more to say about it right now anyway, so everyone's off the hook if you're not enjoying it. I want to say just a little bit, if I can, about systemic change, and then we'll switch gears, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. We have someone who's got their hand up would like to say something to us on the phone. Actually, should we unmute them now? So,
oh yeah, please, yeah.
Wonderful. Hang on a second. How do I do this? Nigari, can you hear us?
Yes. Hello.
How's it going?
Thank you. Thank you for muting me.
Hi.
I was feeling very inspired by hearing Kit talk about how she would just show up and interrupt as there is conflict that she's watching from people outside on the street. And I've lived in the midst of violent armed conflict, so I've had the same experience. But I'm finding what I find difficult, and this is a question I have, is to do it with people that are close to me, like family, to stop them. And I was just wondering if if Kit is able to do the same thing with people that are very close, because for me it's easier to do it with people that I don't know on the street, or with people that are not very close to me, but with very close family members. I've had difficulty doing it, and so I was just curious.
Can I ask you, when you said you've had difficulty doing it, what is it that feels different for you? I mean, I can guess, but I just want to make sure I'm guessing right.
I kind of feel afraid that I will lose belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Like with those other people, like I will probably never see them again.
Right.
But with my family, I guess I'm already the weird one of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you're already the weird one, and they haven't kicked you out yet. That's a good thing to pay attention to.
And whenever I do say something, they say, "Oh, don't you preach about tolerance and peace and love? And how come you're speaking up to say like I don't know." It's kind of an argument they use against me when I speak up to say, I'm feeling uncomfortable here. I would like for us to speak in a different way or hear each other. Or it's like, oh, I thought you were tolerant. You preach about tolerance and you don't accept what we're doing. So there's a lot of judgment that I feel very triggered by. And so I guess I'm afraid. It's fear of losing. I'm guessing belonging. I don't know. I'm terrified of it. I'm terrified. So it feels. I feel very sad about it because I think I'm not being in integrity with my values.
Yeah.
Because how come I can do this so well outside and with the people that are closest to me, I get so triggered and it's so difficult to do it. So
I mean, one thing I just want to share. I want to share in the morning of that how much you would want to be able to do this with people that in your family. It's so hard that sometimes we actually can ironically show up as our best selves with strangers, but the people that are most likely to turn up at our funeral, sometimes they don't get our best selves for whatever sets of reasons, and how much we would like to be able to bring our best game to these settings as well. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I also have heard from so many people, even reading the stories of heroes, so many people who go out and do amazing things in the world, and right at home is the hardest place. Yeah. So I'm trying always to not be harsh on myself for almost a universal condition. I think it's almost universal that all of us sometimes can have a more challenging time in our family for different reasons than out in the world. Maybe we're not seen within our families, or maybe we're seen in our families as in a kind of a static way. They don't see they're less likely to acknowledge the skill set that we have, or the perspectives and abilities that we bring to a situation. So that sort of static thinking that sometimes happens in families, I think, can be one of the barriers. It sounds like there's some static thinking in relation to you too. Is that true at all?
Yeah. I get a lot of judgment about you were this, you were that. So yeah.
So I'm wondering if some of that there might be a way to begin to shift some of that when you're not in the midst of maybe a heated family conflict, but at other times, to say, if somebody showed up and said, you're just one of those unrealistic peacenik types, to be able to come back with some of the kind of responses that might challenge that with some authenticity, to say, so you're struggling to trust that I have a real grasp on the situation. Is that it? You want to have more. Is it that you don't trust that I know how to take care of myself out in the world because I have ideas that you would see as unrealistic? Is that, and just really kind of poke back at those judgments, like what's actually behind the judgment. I think oftentimes those judgments do relate to the sense of I don't trust that you are saying or doing or thinking things that are going to make you okay. So believe it or not, it comes out of a need for your well-being. Sometimes it comes out of how fast we are to compare. So if someone has a different perspective than we have, then it shakes us up. And whatever part of ourselves where we don't actually believe in ourselves, it gets triggered. So I need to push away things that make me question myself.
Yeah, defensiveness. I've noticed that.
Yeah. And so we don't want to be around people that make us question our values and our perspectives. We sometimes will defend them to the death because we want to feel good about ourselves. So someone around in the family who would present different perspectives would be so uncomfortable. Yeah. So my usual thought when I'm sitting with people who are struggling with family stuff, and the family stuff is always the hardest.
Mm.
There's this great story that Marshall Rosenberg, who worked in the nonviolent, who was the one originated the nonviolent communication work, and he used to tell this great story of doing work many years ago up in Toronto, Canada, and I'm so bad. This might be maybe this is a story he's written down in one of his books. I don't know. Probably he did. And this woman was working in a homeless shelter, and so she went to a workshop and got some tools from Marshall and then shortly after, she was working one night behind the counter at the shelter, and a guy came in and said, "I need a place to stay." Do you know the story?
Yes.
Okay, so you know the story. So you're someone who's interested in nonviolent communication. So
Yeah.
So you know the story. So
I don't know the story. I don't know the story.
Oh, you want to hear the story? Okay.
Keep telling.
So quick. So so she said to the man, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't have any rooms left. We're full." And almost before she knew it, the guy was straddling her. She's on the ground with a knife in her throat. This is how I remember him telling the story. So there may be a different version of it in this book. And he said, "You don't understand." And then he swore at her. "You don't understand. I need a place. I need a place to stay tonight." And she said her lips were forming the word but, and then she remembered Marshall saying one of his silly things of, "Don't ever stick your butt in the face of an angry person." So, so she said, so she remembered to say something different than the sentence, "But there's no room." So she said, "So you're desperate for a safe place to stay?" And long story short, she lived through the experience. It ended up being a really empowering experience for her. So Marshall said to her, "What are you doing back in another one of my workshops? You should be the one teaching it." And she said, "Well, that was nothing. Now I have to go home to my mother." So I've had many times when he acknowledged, and I certainly have found it to be true, that the toughest places are the places where are our own families.
Mm-hmm.
So I suggest trying to start to change some of those fixed images at a time when it's not the most heated moments. Find who are the one or two people in your family who you think would be most willing to see you in a less static way. Offer them perspective and support for how they might want to be seen. And then you might have allies the next time things get heated. You might be able to just turn to someone and say, "Hey, I'm really worried about this. I so want our family gatherings to be places where everyone feels welcome. What if this keeps happening and no one wants to see each other anymore?" You could say something like that. Just wonder out loud, and somebody else might be able to pick up the ball in that moment and say, "Yeah, right, knock it off, you guys." So.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Was that any of that sound even remotely doable?
Yeah, I'm thinking about just interrupting just violent conversations and how I just run away because of a discomfort, and I don't want to do that anymore because it really distresses me.
Yeah.
I'm talking that way.
Yeah. It's exhausting, and I'm guessing, and here you are doing, at a family gathering and probably what feels like your precious free time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess on top of that pain, there is the judgment of you prevented someone from killing you and from raping you and from all these things, and you can't stop this. This is ridiculous. You're not.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. So I really would love for at least that part of the judgment of yourself to get taken off and just really hear how almost universal it is that even people who have really great skills, outside in the world often struggle at home with their own families.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I
I
mean,
think,
go ahead.
yeah, just what you said, just coming with curiosity and care, like showing care and saying, "Are you okay? Are you, are you okay? And can I help?" Um, like that would be like a shock, I think. Like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
Like I'm the one shouting and clearly I don't know, just like putting shame on the other person, shouting, hitting the other person, and you're
Right.
asking me if I'm okay is like, wow, someone is seeing my pain and not seeing me for this. Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
I can do that. Yeah.
I was thinking, I was speaking with my husband this morning. I've been reading this really great book from a prosecutor and a Canadian prosecutor who works adjudicating criminal incidents and trials among the Native communities in northern Ontario, and how people thought that when people were that in one of the things he mourned is how long it took him to really understand the deeply different perspective those cultures and those individuals from those cultures had about when violence occurred or when conflict occurred or any like that. For them it was a sign of someone was either briefly ill or that their spirit was really more kind of like permanently damaged, and that they didn't necessarily need to be punished; they needed to be healed. And that's very, for me, way more consistent with the restorative justice approach that I'm a huge fan of. So the idea that when someone is upset or angry, that they're not bad, their spirit is ill, or they themselves are just sort of temporarily ill. They've forgotten their humanity. They've forgotten the others. And so when I can remember that, then even if I don't say anything, I'm still different in relation to it.
Yeah.
And then the one last thing is, I know, again, for me, just watching family dynamics, and I have the chance, I live with my brother, my mother, my stepfather, my husband, and my niece. So I live in an extended family. I have lived in extended family circumstances for years. It's like ground zero for all the craziness in my life, for real. And there's in a way there's a lot of integrity to it because it's right there in my face. And so I can't get away from it. So it's really, even though I want to sometimes. So it's really good, and it's really hard. It's the hardest place. It really is. Because it's like where all my own patterns and challenges all come from, from these giants called mom and dad.
Wow.
So I just if you could just gently lift that layer of judgment off and ask it to go, have a seat in a corner. Because this one's pretty universal in my opinion.
Thank you. That's a huge relief.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your question, Mariari. Appreciate it. It was nice to talk with you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, complexity in all walks of life and everywhere we see.
Yeah. Yep.
We had a couple of comments come through as well, which is always nice to hear from folks. It's a relief to hear about embracing complexity, since so often I hear simplicity offered as a virtue in like-minded communities. I agree that piece about holding everyone's well-being in mind is very important to finding peaceful resolutions, and that can be very difficult sometimes.
Completely.
We had a question come in asking what the name of that book that you were reading at the moment, Kit.
I didn't say it because I wasn't 100% sure. I'm pretty sure it's called Dancing with Ghosts, and it's by an attorney for the Crown in the province of Ontario, Canada. I don't have it here with me. I have it in my bookshelf at home, but I'll be sure to bring it next week and reference it. It's a really deeply thoughtful book about cultural humility and how we can never really ever cease our work of recognizing the fact, the inevitability of our blind spots in relation to other groups of people with different perspectives, other individuals, and how. So this man wrote this very humble, extraordinary book reflecting on his own experiences of really deeply understanding people. Deeply misunderstanding people in his mourning of the Canadian judicial system and how it didn't serve, how it really didn't serve those communities, as did he also mourns other systems that didn't serve those communities, but he himself was within the justice system. And that's a beautiful book. That's very transparent in terms of his own struggles, which I'm always very touched by people who are willing to out themselves, and even when they've had a big career and they look, it's so easy to want to look good, and people who are willing to do something different in the pages of a book, really, I admire that.
Mm-hmm.
If people here haven't read Gandhi's autobiography, but it's one of my big fan moments with Gandhi as a human being, not as the reluctant icon that he is, but just how he wrote so. He wrote so honestly about his struggles with lust, and especially early in as a teenager. He's married as a child, and he wrote that book, and it was published in the 1930s. I mean, if it was written and published now, it would still be something. But given the cultural, historic context of the time, the way that he wrote, just clearly he was on his way to being deeply committed to the truth, no matter what, at that point.
So we've talked earlier on in the call about simplicity here, and that simple answers to complex problems can cause more issues, and as we discussed, we're obsessed with simplicity in a way in terms of solving some of our bigger problems, particularly in the media and politicians, and we've mentioned sound bites. And I was thinking, what are our messages, or what are our messages to the world about complexity and simplicity, and what's our ask? And it might not be we can come up with a soundbite for that, of course. But
Thomas, you want a soundbite on complexity?
Yes, please.
Well, everyone who works with me just laughs because I'm such a nut about paradox. If I haven't said this yet during any of our times together, I'm surprised. I think everything that's true in the universe is also deeply paradoxical. I think it's the one of the hinges of the universe. So I think many things are both can be simple and complex at the same time. I don't think it's an argument. I just want to embrace and look for both. So some things like what is my relationship to complexity? For me, that's simple. I want to be humble. I want to pay attention, and I want to be less afraid of it. So I love simplicity too in terms of my own values choices. I don't want things to get necessarily all complex in relation to that. At the same time, being respectful of the complexity of myself and other people around me is one of the ways that I honor, the divinity of creation. Just learning about any single tree in your garden or in the park near your house. If you found out like the complexity of life, just going around the tree roots, let alone above ground. I mean, nature is nothing but complex. So that's my simple answer.
I've had someone ask for tips on making it easier to tolerate slash be willing to be with complexity. So this idea of humility and paying attention and relaxing into the complexity. Um, mm.
Yep.
And what
You have
about
to be able
this?
to trust yourself too, because if you don't, I think one of the reasons if we don't trust ourselves, then that's one of the times when we want to make things simple. Because if we're not trusting ourselves, then we want it to be simple. We want to force something to happen, because otherwise, I don't want to tolerate the discomfort of whatever's happening. So I'm going to force a simple answer to reduce the unhappiness with uncertainty inside of me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I tell people I have a Catholic hard drive and Buddhist software. And one of the things that I really loved about studying Buddhism as an adult is there's a high tolerance for complexity in Buddhism, which I really appreciate.
And just on that subject of trust, as we look at some of the complex problems that we're facing together in the world, say climate change or anything to do with the environment, in fact, fairly complex issues, and we can trust ourselves. But how do we learn to trust the process or trust the group, particularly when we don't trust the process, or we might not trust some people's intention in the group? So if there's a politician, a leader who has a perspective that we don't trust will yield, a solution that will fix the problem. How do we find trust outside once we find it in ourselves, but then find it, in the wider world for solving some of these bigger problems?
I think that I'm just pulling up a quote right now. This is one of a quote from Guided that I like. If you want to work through nonviolence, you have to proceed with small things, not big. So I agree. It's so overwhelming if we're looking at the whole big world. So my suggestion is just look where, if you want to look where your feet are planted, and get your head over there. Ideas for building trust when it's not very easy to come by, especially in groups. I think trust is the probably most critical form of relational wealth that exists. Think of, I'll just for 1 minute, I'm borrowing this little exercise from Stephen Covey Jr. Just think of someone who you trust, just for a minute with me. And what's it like when you trust someone and you're making a decision together and you disagree? Think about what that's like. Generally, when I ask that question, people say it's easy or it's fun or we're laughing. It's no problem to disagree with someone where there's high trust. I think you and me could have some good fights together, Thomas, because we have a lot of trust between us. And then when we turn our attention to what it's like when there's less trust, the words that people use are often really different. It's tense. There's anxiety, there's avoidance. So trust is one of those things that is a critical thing to pay attention to all the time. And I think, as I maybe have said in an earlier week, for me, creativity and conflict are two sides of the same coin. And what flips the coin from creativity to conflict is whether there's trust. The best work teams, I was with a group of leaders here yesterday morning, and we got into a deep discussion about that, about a team of people that's really high functioning means that they're and creative means that they have to feel free to disagree with each other. So spaces, what helps spaces become more high trust is, one is, as I mentioned earlier, and walk towards conflicts when they're small as much as possible. Like we talked about with the woman who wonderfully joined our call for a few minutes earlier. Refrain from seeing people in a static way. Your brain wants you to do that, by the way. It's not like a moral failing. Our brains want us to look at things in a static way. If any of you have ever had a chance to take a look at that book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, I highly recommend it. It's a huge read. I have cliff notes of it, by the way, that I made. If anybody wants them, you can email and ask them. But our brain wants to see something new, categorize it, and tuck it away so that it can turn its attention to the new stuff coming on. And we do this in part because the world is overwhelming in many ways, and we want to make things. Our brain wants to helpfully make things simple for us, and that helpful thing is not very helpful sometimes because we stop seeing people freshly, especially people we've known for years. I think for me, marriage advice, if I had one, is keep looking freshly at your partner. Reframe the idea of conflict in spaces. Because conflict in high trust environments isn't a problem. It's a source of energy, learning, and creativity. It can be fun to have good fights with people when you trust them. Remember that unexpressed emotions tend to be interpreted wrongly. So that's why I'm super passionate when we have our staff meetings. Even though there's a lot of us, and even though we only meet for 75 minutes every week, we spend time going around the circle because many times people are coming in and their face looks a certain way, and we've been socialized to take that personally. And it's good to hear, I just came in from a really rough day at school, or I just got off the phone, challenging situation someplace else, so we don't take each other personally because unexpressed emotions tend to be interpreted wrongly. So if you, for instance, are showing up and you're feeling tense or frustrated or irritated, do the group or do the other person you're with a favor and just give them a little information about that. You don't have to tell the whole story, but just say, I just want you to know I'm actually having a pretty challenging day today, and I just wanted you to have that information about me before we start talking about this other thing, because I don't want you to take me personally. Tensions and challenges are expected among committed people. There's no way that when people are committed or passionate about a project that they won't show up. So acknowledge and address them as a high priority with the other person as soon as you can. It's not a problem. It's part of working together. I often recommended people to challenge and debates are best held at the level of ideas and strategies. Those strengthen groups. Unexpressed ideas and concerns don't. So be sure to speak up the concern. You don't have to have a solution to a problem in order to name it. And the last one I'll just say, just for time's sake right now, is to something that I really enjoyed, an expression from my days at Bay NVC in Oakland, California, hanging around with Mickey Kashtan and others, is that to offer an assumption of innocence to colleagues when oversights occur, like forgetting to check a decision or dropping someone from an email, a chain, be slow to assume poor intentions. Give people the benefit of a doubt. So those are just a few ideas around trust building.
Yeah, those are really great, and I think there's some good stuff that we can take into our own lives there. I mean, I always find myself drawn to the bigger picture. So how do we get the politicians to trust each other? Because if they could trust each other, they could, hear what each other's saying without, feeling, this whole idea of feeling free to disagree. I think that exists in most political systems because there's obviously a lot of debate that happens. And then, of course, I worry that some of the newer politicians of the world, particularly here in the US, don't necessarily take disagreement very well.
Well, culture drives politics. So we don't, I might not be able to have access to a world leader or even a state leader or a province leader, depending on where I live, but culture drives politics. So I can start working in this way myself and see what happens. And one of the things that came up when I was working with a group of community leaders yesterday, as well as with the university students at the end of the day yesterday, was we need to be thoughtful about technology, because the technology that all of us are using, I think, and they all thought too, which was encouraging to me, really drives this our ability to swiftly label and dismiss and dehumanize, because we're not benefiting from face-to-face as much as we used to. And we can be reactive because information can fly back and forth so much. So I think it's important for us to be really thoughtful about when does technology serve communication and when does it limit it.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that.
I'd love to hear from maybe a couple people, and then because I'm noticing we're coming up on the end of our time.
We are. We had someone ask feel free to ask some final questions, by the way, type them on in. We've had someone ask, I would like some real examples of complex situations where you forced a simple answer that made it worse. And I guess while you think about that, Kit, I can name some at the political level where, the issue of immigration, quite a complex thing. A simple answer proposed is, build a wall, we'll build a wall. Obviously a lot more complex than that, and of that simple answer might make things worse. You might spend a lot of money building a wall that people can just go around, go over, go under, go by the sea. And the same again with what I witnessed in England in Brexit, leaving the European Union. People were honestly shouting, out! That was, if you asked them, they would just say this one word, which is it was compared at the time to a sort of basic fundamental sort of reptilian part of the human brain, which wants simplicity, risk, fear, run. Doesn't like complex things, and the argument to stay in the EU was quite complex, and the argument to leave the EU was very simple, and that simplicity was played upon by those who were in favor of a solution of leaving the European Union.
Yep.
Kit, have you got any examples that you can think of simple solutions actually making a complex problem worse?
Oh, gosh, I think many laws that are passed are attempting to have like a one-size-fits-all solution. Well, let me think about it. I mean, I often think of laws and policies in that way, that they try to do something and then they inadvertently end up having this effect or that effect. I'll bet there's a number. I mean, anyone maybe on the call might be able to think of a law or a policy that they're aware of that was meant to do this thing, but it ended up doing this and this and this. So I think often, even our systemic response to crime, we want to decide in our current justice system called the retributive justice system, we want to decide who's right, who's wrong, and what blame, what judgment or what punishment should be assigned. We sort of force simplicity in these situations, whereas the restorative system holds complexity. It recognizes that if my son mugged your wife, Thomas, it recognizes the relational complexity that you and I are both involved in that. We're both impacted by it. A restorative system would bring as many people as were involved together to look at what's the answer to the conundrum of my son struggling and robbing people, rather than just this sort of automatic system that would say, this kid mugged, put him into juvie for 6 months. And then the kid, I mean, I have friends who work in the juvenile justice system, and they would laugh because so many kids get sent into those things for sometimes not the best reasons, but even for a really good reason, but they end up coming out worse than they went in. So I think many of the systems that we've got now, they're in an effort to relate and to try to simplify an issue. There's all these unintended consequences that come out of it. So I know I'm saying some like hard or maybe obscure things today, but it's like I want to force our systems thinking brains to turn on to 2.0. I think as we're moving into a very complex, very interconnected planet, the temptation that we might have and that our technology sometimes feeds us into to go for simplicity, I'm worried about that as a trend. And
Thank you,
I'm
Kit.
just paying attention. We're past time here.
We are, we are. Um, we'll wrap up with some gratitude, Kit. Just one thing before we go. Kimberly has found out the name of that book for everyone. It is called Dancing with Ghosts, and it's by Rupert Ross.
Thank you so
And
much.
she said she loved that book, so I'm sure we all will too.
Mm.
Um, just to finish off, Kit, we'll end with a bit of gratitude. And we're always interested in hearing what's been happening at the Gandhi Institute. It's an amazing place. So perhaps to finish off, you could share with us something this week or recently that happened at the Gandhi Institute that you're particularly grateful for.
I'm heading downstairs, and right now we have a workshop that's starting here in 26 minutes called Let's Talk About Hate. And we're bringing groups of people together to discuss hate. What is it? How does understanding it relate to our life's purpose? And what's the medicine for hate? And I'm particularly grateful that this one is going to be filmed. So hopefully it's something that we can put together a very short film on relatively quickly and get it out so that many other people might be willing to bring folks together to look at this. Because for me, in my training of trying to look deeper, trying to look at issues, hate is the issue of hate, and our response to it is one of the fundamental kind of levers for change right now. So I'm excited about turning my attention to that in a moment.
Mm. Well, I mean, as always, Kit, I'm just inspired by the work that you're doing and all your colleagues are doing at the Gandhi Institute, and I know you've got your annual appeal at the moment to support your work, so if anyone listening to this would like to contribute to Kit's work, and of course to the series, then you can go to the Gandhi Institute website and make a donation. It says gandhiinstitute.org. And we mentioned last week about this Gandhi deck, which are amazing cards that will allow you to, and your colleagues and friends to, get a bit of vitamin G, as we call it, vitamin Gandhi. Every day you can pull a card and read another insight from Kit and her colleagues about Gandhi and everything that he and other people have had to teach us. So thank you for your time, Kit, and your words and thoughts. Feeling very enriched, and I'm sure other people are too. If you have any feedback, please do email that in. And until next time, we look forward to speaking with you all again. Thanks so much, Kit.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for spending the time with us. I'm grateful.
Awesome. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.